before you start this repair, you're going to want to keep in mind, anytime you replace any kind of steering or suspension components, you're going to want to go to a local shop and have your vehicle aligned to prevent premature tire wear. Take a 21mm socket, take the lug nuts off, and remove the tire. Take a trim tool, remove any trim clips that are underneath this panel right here. Right here. There should be some more on this vehicle. Any that are over here as well. I'm going to use a 10mm socket and a ratchet and remove any screws that are in the front of this. This vehicle only has 2. Bring this panel down, slide it out towards the back of the vehicle. Now I'm just taking some side cutters. I want to remove this cotter pin. Just grab the cotter pin, bend it back. Once you can pull it through a little bit, just grab it. Try not to cut it, because then it's harder to get it out. Just slide it out. Just using a 19mm wrench. Loosen up the nut. And try to get that nut off. If it doesn't come off, that's okay. We're going to separate the ball joint from the knuckle. And that's okay, that'll just sit there for now. Just going to use a pickle fork to remove the ball joint from the knuckle. There is different tools you can use to remove ball joints. Some just have forks that slide in there and then push down on the top of the ball joint. When you're using a pickle fork, normally it ruins the boot, but if you're replacing the arm or the tie rod end or the ball joint, it's not going to matter. There we go, it's separated. Now I can remove the tool, slide the lower control arm, slide the ball joint out of the knuckle, and just push the knuckle out of the way. I'm going to use a screw jack to support the cradle right here. Just find an area where it's going to be solid. Right there is good. Now I'm going to remove these bolts back here using a 19mm socket. Just make sure you hold this bracket when you take this bolt out. And then with a longer extension and the same 19mm socket, remove this bolt. Now on the opposite side of the vehicle, I'm just going to loosen these bolts up. I'm not going to take them out completely. Loosen them so there's about 1 inch of the bolt showing. That's good right there. These 2 I can take out completely. Same 19mm socket. And then this one, just loosen so there's about 1 inch of bolt showing. Right about there. I'm going to take these 2 bolts out, and I'll take these 2 bolts out on the opposite side as well. I'm going to use a 17mm socket. Now we can lower the screw jack, and with this bolt right here, we should be able to access that bolt and remove it. Now, if you need more clearance, just take a pry bar, get right in between the cradle and the frame, and just pry it down a little bit. You don't want to pry it down too far, but just a little bit. Just take a 22mm socket and remove this bolt. Now take a 22mm wrench, put it on the nut on top of that bolt, and then take a 22mm socket and take this bolt out. Then take a pry bar, just get underneath the control arm, slide it out, and slide it out over here as well. And there you go. All right, before we put the control arm up, just take the casting nut off here. And we want to take this little cover off, throw that away. That's just to protect the boot during shipping. Now we can slide the control arm up in position over here. Might have to wiggle it back and forth a little bit. Slide the back part into position. That's good. We'll slide the front. And if you need to use a rubber mallet or a dead blow hammer, just tap it back into position. Just take a screwdriver, slide this so it's in the correct position so you can get the bolt in. And just take the nut, put the nut on top. And then just take a screwdriver or a pry bar, get this bolt hole lined up. Slide that bolt in. Just gonna use the 22mm socket. I'm just gonna snug this up first. Now I'm going to take the 22mm socket and I'm going to torque this bolt to 172 foot-pounds. Keep in mind, you want to keep the control arm as close to ride height level as possible. What they want you to do is put everything together, put the vehicle down on the ground, and then torque this bolt on the ground. But it's really difficult to get a torque wrench under here while you're on the ground. So it's best just to get the control arm as close to as possible and torque it that way. I switched to a short socket to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to use a 22mm wrench to hold the nut on top and a 22mm socket. Tighten this up. And then we're going to torque this the same 172 foot-pounds. Hold the wrench while you do this. Now I'll just raise the cradle up with the screw jack. And then take the long bolt first with the 19mm socket. Get this one started. This bolt with the 19mm socket. With the bracket, just get that one started. Get these bolts started. And same with this side. And the front, if you need to, you can use a screwdriver to align the holes up. And put the same bolts on the other side. Now all the bolts are in. Now there is an alignment hole for the lower cradle, so you could take some type of pick or a punch and get it to line up. So if you look straight up, you can see the hole through there. And this side, it is similar, it's slotted. So you can get those as close as possible. You're still gonna need to get an alignment performed after you do this job, but at least you're gonna get it close. And then just snug that up with a 19mm socket. Same with this side. Make sure that's close. Snug those up. Snug these two up. And these front ones. Now I'm going to torque these with a 17mm socket to 73 foot-pounds. Same with this one, and then same with these two. Then for this bracket, these two back ones, and then the same on the driver's side. with a 19mm socket to 69 foot-pounds. These two back cradle bolts, the driver's side and the passenger side, to 101 foot-pounds with the 19mm socket. And these other cradle bolts further up to 101 foot-pounds. This side and the passenger side. At this point, we can remove the screw jack, slide the knuckle out of the way, and then pull it closer so that we can get the ball joint stud through the knuckle. Sometimes you just gotta force this so it moves the stud. And there we go. Take the castle nut, install the castle nut. This new castle nut is a 22mm, so use a 22mm wrench. Tighten this up. And then it's somewhat difficult to torque this, but if you can have the ability to use a torque wrench and torque this nut, you want to torque this to 98 foot-pounds. There is a hole in the stud, which the new cotter pin is going to go through. So you always want to use a new cotter pin. This lower control arm comes with the cotter pin. So we want to get the castle nut lined up with the hole. There we go. And take the cotter pin, slide it through the hole. Get the cotter pin through, just take my straight cutters. I'm going to grab the top part of the cotter pin, fold it over, just like that. And then I'm just going to trim the end off on the lower part. Now we're going to install this panel. Just slide this in position. And take the screws that go here. Get those started. And if you have any push pins that go in there, slide those in position, and then over here, slide the push pins over here, and right here. Now this vehicle only has 2 screws here. I'm going to use my 10mm socket and a ratchet, tighten these up. And then you'd want to tighten up all the other ones. And any push pins that go over here as well. Install the wheel. And the lug nuts. Now I'm going to take a 21mm socket and a torque wrench. I'm going to tighten these lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds in a star pattern. That way the wheel gets tightened down evenly. I can go around again, just double check.